everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to crochet this berry stitch. Now this is sometimes called an uneven berry stitch, so I really hope that you enjoy the tutorial, and if you haven't subscribed already then please do so now to keep up to date with all of my weekly tutorials. But let's crack on with this variation on the berry stitch. So for the tutorial itself I'm going to be using some of this Lemire range XL mercerized cotton. This is a really nice hot pink shade, and you can see it's got a really nice sheen to it as well. So I will leave a link in the description about where you can purchase this yarn from if you were wondering. So obviously we're going to start with our slip knot as always, and if you're not sure how to do it then just nip and check out my beginner series. So for this berry stitch variation you want to start with a foundation chain in multiples of 2, so any even number. So just yarn over and pull through. So if you just want to complete your foundation chain in an even number, and I will see you in a tick. So I've just done a chain of 28, obviously I'm only doing a small sample piece, but if you were doing like washcloths or something like that, then you would just chain until you were obviously happy with the length that you had. So now for row 1 we are simply going to work our way back along this foundation chain, and we're going to work all the way back along doing double crochet. So obviously that's UK double, in the US this is your single. So we're going to work into the 3rd chain, so we're going to skip this first one and the next, and into that 3rd chain you're going to do a double. So yarn over and pull up, you'll have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through both. And then again into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up, yarn over, pull through both. And you're just going to do that all the way along, and I will meet you as you get back towards the end of your row. So I've completed that row of doubles, and this is how you should be looking now. So we're going to move on to row 2, which is when we actually start the proper pattern itself. So you want to chain 1 and turn. Now that chain 1 is going to count as our slip stitch for this very first stitch here. So it's going to count as a slip stitch for the top of this stitch. So we're going to miss that one there, and we're going to do our first berry stitch into the next stitch along. So we're going to miss the base of that first one, and we're going to do a berry stitch into the next. Now to do a berry stitch you want to yarn over, insert into that stitch, make sure you get the whole of the stitch, so you want to get the little V across the top. You'll yarn over and pull up, and you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through the first loop. So you're not going to pull through anymore, you're just going to pull through that first loop, and you should still have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, insert back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up, and you'll have 5 loops on your hook. And then again yarn over and pull through the first loop only, and you will still have 5 loops on your hook. At this point you'll yarn over and pull through all of those loops and chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't count as a separate stitch, it is part of that berry stitch. It is to close off the berry. Into this next stitch now, so the very next one along, you're going to do a slip stitch. So again, insert through the whole of the stitch, yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on the hook as well. So that is your very first little set of stitches, and then into the next stitch along you will do another berry stitch. So yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the first loop only, yarn over, go back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up. This time you'll have 5 loops, yarn over and pull through the first loop, and then yarn over and pull through all of those remaining loops. Can be a little bit fiddly, this one. And chain 1 to secure. And then again you're going to slip stitch into the next. So you're just going to repeat that pattern all the way across, and you should see when you turn it over that your little stitches puff out slightly to that side. So if you need to pause or rewind, you're just simply going to repeat berry stitch, slip stitch all the way along. And then when you get to the end, I will meet you in just a moment. So I'm almost back at the other end now. I've got 2 stitches left. So my final 2 stitches will be a berry stitch and then a slip stitch into that very first little turning chain. So I'll complete my berry now. This last couple of stitches can be a little bit fiddly because you haven't got very much to hold on to when you're working your stitches. So chain 1, and then you can see we've got that little tiny blobby bit, which is where we're going to work our final slip stitch. So you just want to insert your hook into those stitches. Can always be a little fiddly, this bit, but as long as you get in there somewhere on the end of those stitches, you don't need to be massively precise. And we're just going to slip stitch. So that is your first little row of berry and slip stitches, and so this is one side, and then on the other side they should all stick out a little bit. So to move on to the next row, so we want to chain 2 and turn, and we are going to be working into the tops of the berry stitches and into the slip stitches in between. So you want to find the top of your berry stitch, so it will be the chain 1 that you did. So you'll have to turn your berry stitch slightly, and you can see the stitch, the top of that stitch just here, and you're going to slip stitch. So you want to insert into that top, on the very top of your berry. You're going to insert and slip stitch. And then you're going to go down in between those berries to where you've got your slip stitch. So when you look in between your berries, you've got the 2 longer stitches either side, and then you've got the short little stitch in the middle, and that is your slip stitch. So you want to do a double crochet into there. So they can be, obviously with them being slip stitches, they can be quite tough to get into. And then you're going to do your double crochet. So yarn over and pull through both. And then again, into the top of your berry stitch, you will do a slip stitch. So again, you might need to turn the berry slightly and insert into that stitch and slip stitch. And then again, down in between the berries where you've got your slip stitch, you'll do a double crochet. So you're just going to work that all the way along now, and I will meet you as you get towards the other end. I've done my slip stitch into the top of that last berry, and then I just need to finish with a double crochet down on that very first chain 1 that we did last time. So after the berry stitch, you'll have that chain 1, and you're just going to do a double crochet into that final stitch. So that is how you should be looking after this next row. And we're ready now to move on to another row of berry stitches. So you're going to chain 1 and turn, and again that chain 1 counts as the first slip stitch for this row, and we are then going to do a slip stitch into the next stitch. So it will be a slip stitch into the slip stitch from the last row, so you're missing over the top of this stitch here, and you're going to go into that next stitch and you're going to do another slip stitch. We are now going to do our first berry, and the berry will be being worked into the top of the double crochet from the last row, so it'll be a looser stitch, it'll be an easier stitch to work in. So a berry stitch in exactly the same way as before into the top of the double crochet from the previous row. Chain 1, and then you're going to slip stitch into the top of the slip stitch, so it will be the next stitch along. You will slip stitch, and then again you're at a double crochet, and so you're going to work another berry stitch, and you're just going to do that all the way along. Like last time, you're going to alternate between your berry stitch and your slip stitch. So the slip stitch goes into the top of the slip stitch and the berry stitch goes into the top of the double crochet, and always remember that chain 1. So again, slip stitch into the top of the slip stitch on the previous round of the previous row, and again you're going to do a berry. So if you just continue that all the way along, and I will meet you at the other end in just a second. I'm just coming towards the end now. I've done my final berry stitch and chain 1. I want to slip stitch into the next stitch, which again is another slip stitch from the previous row, and then we want to do one final slip stitch into the next stitch. So it's really hard to see on the end here. You need to do an additional slip stitch into there. It's going to be a little bit fiddly, but that is how we should be looking now. And so for row 5, you're going to chain 2 and turn. We are then going to skip the base of where we have just come up from, and into that next slip stitch along we are going to do a double crochet. So you yarn over and pull up and complete your double, and then again we're working into the top of our berry stitches with a slip stitch. So into the top of your berry stitch you're going to slip stitch. And then again down in between your berries into that slip stitch you're going to do a double crochet, and you're going to repeat all that all the way along again, and I will meet you as you get back towards this end. So I've completed a slip stitch onto the top of that last little berry, and then a double crochet down into that next slip stitch, and then we've just got the one little funny chain 1 there at the very end that we just want to work our final slip stitch into. So this can be a bit of a fiddly stitch sometimes, but you're just going to slip stitch into there, and that is the end of row 5. Now the pattern repeat on this one is rows 2 to 5, and that way your berries are always slightly offset. They're never stacked directly on top of each other, they are slightly offset. So by repeating rows 2 to 5, that is the look that you will get. So if you want to obviously rewind now to where we started row 2, and row 2 was the very first row of berry stitches that we did after our foundation chain. So you will chain 1 and turn, and that chain 1 counts as the slip stitch. And so we are going to miss the very base of that stitch. So you're going to miss the very base of that stitch that you would have just come up from. So you're missing that stitch just there. And then you will do your berry stitch into that next double crochet. And then obviously you will just continue along that pattern, doing rows 2 to 5 over and over again. And that is how you create the berry stitch variation. So I really hope that you have enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have, then please remember to give it a quick thumbs up. But I will see you for another tutorial very soon. Thanks as always. Bye.